Let's get to the very latest on the National Football League. The Baltimore Ravens open up training camp and then preseason next week. Great to have Melissa Kim here on the show to break it all down for us. You can hear, of course, on the radio, on the Fan in Baltimore, and it's great to have you back. It's been a long time. Thanks for checking in.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's football season, right? We're getting amped up and ready to go. So it's been a off season always feels so long, but I know it's the same amount of time every year, but it always just feels so long before we get to football season and training camp. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's great to see it again. And look, every year I feel like when we talk about the Ravens, it's sort of Super Bowl or bust, but it is kind of getting to that point where at some point it's got to happen. Is this the year that you think that potentially it happens? It feels like the regular season can be sleptwalked at this point for the Ravens because if they don't win several playoff games and at least get to the end, I feel like people are going to look at this as a failure.
I mean, you're absolutely right about that, Craig. I'm going every year with such cautious optimism, right? Watching this team now, entering my fifth season watching this team, and for their sixth season watching this team rather. And look, every year we come in saying exactly what you said, Super Bowl or bust, right? Especially with how Lamar Jackson has developed throughout his career. He's only gotten better, and I think he's matured as well as a quarterback in terms of how he manages the game. And then you look at some of the weapons that he's been surrounded by. For me personally, the year for me was when they had that historically incredible defense when Odell Beckham Jr. was on the offense. That was such a big year for me. And as we keep on going, as we continue throughout the seasons, that's the year I always look back and I'm kind of like, oh, like what could have been, what should have been, what might have been had the offense just had been a little bit better in that AFC Championship game against the Chiefs, because that defense, they're never going to, I don't know if they're ever going to be able to replicate that. But saying all that, having said all that, last year was kind of the opposite, right? The offense was making historic plays, like setting records, and then the defense was the one that was still in the learning phases a little bit. Obviously, having a lot of new personnel, obviously new defensive coordinator Zach Orr, who now has some experience under his belt. And this year we see DeAndre Hopkins on the field as well, who has a history of being able to get comfortable with quarterbacks early on. And we've definitely seen that between him and Lamar Jackson. So yeah, there are a lot of factors at play, but you're certainly not wrong about that for the Ravens, for the team themselves, and especially for the fans too. It's got to be a Super Bowl. I mean, it's been looming, I think, for the last 5 years of what this team could be. And we look at the end of every season like they're just this close.
And really, they have the talent to do it. They added DeAndre Hopkins, and certainly that's a big add for them if he can get back to what he was a few years ago. Zay Flowers is back once again after the great year that he had. Rashad Bateman was a touchdown machine. So I think let's start there because we know who's going to run the ball. But do you think it's the same group of pass catchers this year?
I think yes, but also let's expand on some of the guys they have. One guy I really have loved since he came to the Ravens, not really spoken about a lot, is tight end Charlie Kohler. So he came in from Iowa State. He's an extremely cerebral guy. And the times that you talk to him, I mean, we had like a 20-minute conversation once, one on one. I think about like for 7 minutes of it, he talked about his favorite condiment, and like literally went in depth of like every single one of what he likes. So he's there's a lot going on upstairs for him. And when he makes mistakes, he knows automatically right away. He'll be like, well, I ran the wrong route there. That was my bad. And so I think that he is someone that size wise too is a very large human being, has been great in blocking in the last couple of years. But I think that we could maybe see him emerge quite a bit more this year. I know he has great chemistry with all the guys on the team. He's someone I'm keeping an eye on. And obviously you mentioned the usual suspects, of course, Zay Flowers, who has the quickest feet I've ever seen. Rashad Bateman, couldn't be more happy for him and what he's been able to do, because, he had been injury ridden for the last couple of seasons and finally was able to have a breakout year. So definitely, I think a couple of the usual suspects that will add to, I think, what DeAndre Hopkins could possibly bring to this team.
Now, Isaiah Likely, that's a big injury, of course, and certainly they're going to put the best outlook on this. It says maybe 4 to 6 weeks. That could really put him out for the beginning of the season. And Melissa, sometimes we hear these things that he could be back for week one. Teams do tend to go on the side of caution, and I'm not saying that he's going to be put on that physically unable to perform list, but Kolar could be one of those guys that may have to step up in his absence.
Yeah, I'm excited, honestly, for the possibility of Charlie Kohler, because he is like a real. I don't know if it's really noticeable to people from the outside the organization or outside this beat reporting team, but he really is fun. He's fun to watch. He's a fun guy on the sideline. He's fun to talk to. I hope he kind of brings some of that joy into his game. And also, like, we can't forget Mark Andrews, obviously, too. The OG of the OGs in that tight end room, and still arguably Lamar Jackson's favorite target. And I know he's gotten a lot of flack in the last couple of months, especially given the way that last season ended for him, but he's come to terms with it. He has obviously worked through a lot mentally and emotionally to get over that. And so I think he's still going to be a reliable figure for Lamar Jackson to throw the ball to.
Now, what about kicking here? It's a new era for the Ravens because Justin Tucker, with all of the issues both on and off the field last year, has been shown the door, so to speak. What do you think happens with Baltimore's kicking game this year?
Listen, I think that it is indeed a new era. I mean, Justin Tucker has obviously been a figure in this organization and in Baltimore for so long, but they purposely went out and drafted, got some other guys. Tyler Loop, I think, has been pretty solid for the most part in what we've seen from him. So I think that this is an opportunity, right? I think for him to make a name for himself, for any of some of these other younger guys that they have, to be able to. Obviously, you can't replicate what someone like Justin Tucker has done on the field, but I think it's an opportunity for them to find somebody new, for someone to come and make a name for themselves. And I think Tyler Loop is on his way.
Finally, Melissa, in the end, do you think that this potentially is the season that the Ravens do get over the hump here? I mean, it is Kansas City, it is Buffalo, and it is Baltimore, and it feels like is it more the Ravens stepping up, or is it more of Kansas City taking a step back?
I think it's more of the Ravens stepping up. I mean, those three teams that you just mentioned there, those three are the ones to beat, right, in the AFC side. So obviously, Kansas City has had their turn. Buffalo's had their turn. It better be Baltimore's turn this year. But no, I think the Ravens, they've had, like you mentioned, like we've been talking about, they have the talent, they've got the goods. Every year, something just seems to happen where they beat themselves. It's not necessarily that the other team is better. I think that they've kind of had some issues in that sense. So I think that as long as they can just be themselves, play their game, stick to what they're good at, and not stray away from the plan, they'll be okay.
Thanks, Melissa, for coming on.